The Amber Shoes by Demi B, 2025. Bree pressed her forehead to the car window as the moving truck rattled over the curb. The house looked strange, too tall, with shutters that blinked like sleepy eyes. The yard smelled of damp leaves and cool soil. A crow let out a rusty caw from a telephone pole. Bree missed the loop of her old block, the sidewalk mapped with seams she already knew, the maple that threw speckled light across her bedroom wall, the neighbor's dog whose tags clinked like wind chimes. Here, everything felt big and echoing, like a gym after school. Her mother was already calling where boxes should go, her voice brisk with plans. Grandma Marilyn touched Bree's shoulder. "New places seem bigger than they are," she murmured. "They shrink as you fill them." Bree nodded and followed them inside, unsure how long until this house learned her footsteps. After lunch, Grandma Marilyn suggested they sort the attic. The pull-down ladder creaked, and a draft climbed down first. Cedar, dust, a sweet old smell like pressed leaves. The attic wasn't theirs yet, not really, but it carried the smell as though the house had been holding on to its own stories. Dust motes drifted in a gold slant of sun. Boxes stacked like little cities lined the low walls. "Attics keep what a house doesn't want to forget," Grandma said, lifting the lid of a wooden chest whose hinges whined softly. Folded quilts lay like sleeping hills. Scarves smelled faintly of soap. Bree reached past a rolled shawl and touched something cool and stiff. She drew out a pair of scuffed leather shoes, their seams stitched with thick amber-colored thread. Ordinary, but the kind of ordinary that keeps a secret. She tipped them toward the light. For an instant, the stitching caught and held it, as if the thread remembered sunshine. Grandma's eyes softened. "Ah," she said, "a small treasure." Bree sat cross-legged on the floorboards and slipped the shoes on, a little loose, but they settled around her feet like a cat adjusting itself. One sigh, and then still. She stood carefully. The leather flexed. The amber thread warmed, glowing faintly like coals under ash. Bree glanced at a tall mirror that leaned against a beam. She looked taller, yes, but also steadier, like someone who could try a new street without a map. Her heart tapped at her ribs. Grandma Marilyn smiled in that faraway way that made Bree think of old summers she hadn't lived. Bree bent to untie the laces, then paused. A small fizzy thought rose in her chest. Not yet. The attic felt warmer, as if a match had been struck and cupped in two hands. While her mother clinked dishes downstairs, Bree wandered the backyard. The sky laid down bands of peach and violet, and the glow brushed against her brown skin, warm as late sunlight across autumn fields. The air carried chimney wood smoke and the viney scent of cut stems. She scuffed her shoes through the grass. A thin ribbon of light unfurled behind her, golden, delicate, fading as she turned. She stared, then tried again. One careful step, dim light. One quick, brave step, brighter. A run straight through a drift of leaves, and the ribbon shone like honey poured from a height. Bree crouched and touched the grass where the glow had been. Only wet blades and the sweet rot of leaves. The trail existed only while she moved forward. "You want me to go?" she whispered, and the seams answered with a shy glimmer. She tested the shoes until the sky blued into evening. When she tiptoed, the light went shy. When she squared her shoulders, it brightened. She called, "Hello, new yard," and stepped toward the darker line of trees. The shoes blazed as if delighted, a molten thread looping behind her. A breeze combed the branches, leaves rashed together. Bree stopped at the edge of the trees, chest thumping, and grinned. A true grin, not the kind adults check for. A secret now walked with her, stitched in amber. It made the house feel less like a stranger. At the porch the next morning, her breath made pale clouds. Bree whispered her own name. A test. Felt silly, then took 3 quick steps. The seams warmed, as if nodding. She pictured walking into a new classroom and tried again. Warmer still. "You're on my side," she told the shoes. They didn't answer, but she felt taller. At breakfast, her mother eyed the shoes. "Where did those come from?" "The attic," Bree said, trying to keep her voice casual. Grandma Marilyn sipped tea, eyes kind. Cedar chests preferred giving their best finds to curious hands. She folded her newspaper, watching Bree cross the kitchen. "You're walking like the ground already knows your steps," she said, amused, but let the thought drift away. Bree smiled into her cereal and kept the secret's edges tucked close. The schoolyard galloped with noise. Whistles, laughter, a ball skittering. Bree hovered by the fence, clutching her backpack straps, counting breaths. She watched a cluster of kids chase each other, their voices loud and easy, and felt the distance like a wall. The shoes felt heavy, as though waiting for her to step forward. Inside, she slid her feet back until the shoes hid under her desk. When the teacher asked, "Would you introduce yourself?" Bree's throat turned to a stuck zipper. Her palms dampened, her curls prickled at her scalp, and her stomach twisted as though she'd swallowed a knot. She looked down. The amber seams flickered like a friend waving from far away. Her voice caught, so faint even she barely heard it. A hush threatened to close over her. The shoes pulsed again, urging her forward. She tried again, louder this time. "I'm Bree." The name wobbled at the start, but steadied by the end. A hush. Then the teacher's smile like a green light. A few nods from nearby desks. The shoes steadied, warm as a hand squeeze. Bree sat, surprised by the space that opened in her chest, as if a window had been cracked for air. On the swings, Bree dragged her toes through dust, drawing lines that the wind erased. A freckled girl with a quick grin plunked into the next seat. "You were brave," she said. "First days are the worst." "You think so?" Bree asked. The girl nodded. "I'm Lena. I almost threw up last year." Bree laughed, a hiccup, but real. She glanced down. The seam's light was faint in the noon sun, yet there. "There's a festival," Lena said, pumping her legs. We hang decorations tomorrow. Wanna come? Bree's mouth formed a no. Her chest squeezed, the word nearly slipping out before she swallowed it. She pictured herself standing awkwardly, getting in the way, everyone noticing the new girl. Then the shoes gave a warm nudge against her heels, steady as a hand at her back. Okay, she said, surprising herself. They walked home together, crunching a confetti of leaves. Bree tried a joke she'd thought of in class and had been too shy to say. Lena laughed, clapping once like a spark. For a heartbeat, Bree saw a pale shimmer curve behind them along the sidewalk, trailing their talk. Lena didn't mention it, and Bree didn't ask. Some things didn't need pointing at to be true. She imagined the shoelaces as small reins that steadied the skittish horse of her courage. The thought made her want to trot. At dinner, Bree's mother looked at her feet and squinted softly, like reading tiny print. "Those shoes," she said. "I had a pair almost exactly like them." Bree's fork paused. "You did?" Her mother's smile tilted with memory. They made hard days less hard. Then she asked Grandma about which boxes hid the baking pans, and the conversation turned. Later, alone in her room, Bree traced the amber stitching with a fingertip. "What did you do for her?" she asked the quiet leather. The seams glowed briefly, as if remembering, but kept the story sealed. The next day, the square smelled of cider and fresh hay. Strings of warm bulbs zigzagged overhead. Banners flapped like quick fish. Kids teetered on short ladders, taping paper leaves to poles. Adults carried crates and gave thumbs up. A sign painter brushed letters with a steady hand. Somewhere, a radio hummed under the rattle of boxes. Bree held the tail of a banner while Lena climbed to tie the other end. Bree's palms sweated. What if she let the cloth slip? The glow at her feet thinned. "Almost," Lena called, knotting the cord. "Almost," Bree echoed. Almost brave, almost helpful, almost ready to set the banner free and step back. She remembered one of Grandma's sayings. Fear always feels bigger when you look at it head on. Step sideways and it shrinks. The thought made her shoulders ease, if only for a moment. Wind lifted from nowhere, a cool hand over the face of the square. Bree watched dust skitter and a paper leaf sail. She pictured herself walking the long way around the commons, pretending to fix a different corner, disappearing before anyone noticed. Her shoes cooled, the seams going quiet. Near the gazebo, a younger kid juggled 2 pumpkins and almost dropped both. Bree's heart stuttered. I could go, she thought. No one knows me here. I could be the girl who leaves. A prickly shame gathered, thin but sticky. The shoes didn't glow. They waited. The wind barreled back, shouldering through the square. Banners ripped, tails snapping like kites. Pumpkins bumped, rolled, thumped into ankles. A decorative arch shuddered and folded with a timbered sigh. Children yelped. A boy on a ladder froze. A woman carrying cider trays gasped, nearly dropping the lot. A few kids shouted, "It's ruined!" The mess swelled too large for anyone to know where to start. Bree's fear flashed white, bright as a camera burst. She spun to run. One step, and the shoes flared so suddenly she gasped. Heat poured through the seams, up her ankles. "Okay," she told herself out loud. One word she could hold. She lunged, caught a banner edge before it dragged, then another. The golden trail behind her braided and brightened, a rope of light showing where to dart next. "Bree!" Lena shouted, jumping down to help. Bree grabbed for a cord, but fumbled the knot, fingers clumsy with panic. The banner slipped, almost tearing loose again. "Hold it tighter!" Lena cried, dropping to steady her. Together, they wrestled it back, Bree's hands trembling until Lena's grip steadied hers. They tied the cord at last, rough but strong. Then both of them braced a pole while a boy righted the wobbling arch. The glow didn't fix anything for Bree. It only made it harder to choose not to try. She tried. Her chest opened to bigger breaths. Her hands learned the clumsy kindness of knots. A few children hesitated, watching Bree with wide eyes, unsure whether to jump in. One shook his head and muttered, "It's ruined anyway." But when Bree steadied the arch with Lena, shoes blazing, their doubt cracked. Slowly, they bent to gather pumpkins and leaves, following not orders, but the sight of someone small moving anyway. When the square finally settled, pumpkins quiet as dogs at rest, Bree's legs trembled with spent lightning. She and Lena collapsed on the grass, hair stuck to their foreheads. Overhead, strings of bulbs clicked on early against the dimming sky, turning the square to a warm constellation of small, steady lights. Bree looked at her shoes, expecting the seams to darken now the work was done. Instead, a faint amber pooled around them both, soaking the grass like honey tea. Lena didn't comment. She laced her fingers behind her head and sighed. "I told you," she said, eyes on the bulbs. "You're brave." Bree's throat tightened pleasantly. She believed it in a quiet, sturdy way, the way one believes shoes will hold when you take a step. By evening, the square glowed under the strings of light. Music drifted like a friendly river. Paper stars shivered above the booths. Bree weaved with Lena through families and dogs and strollers. People admired the arch as if it had never fallen. No one knew how close everything had slumped. Bree carried that secret like a warm stone in her pocket. She caught her mother's gaze across the crowd and without flinching, waved. By the gazebo, Grandma Marilyn sat with a paper cup of cider. Her smile, when Bree ran over, held mischief and pride in equal measure. On the porch later, the night cool brushed their cheeks. "Grandma," Bree said, and the word warmed her mouth. "These shoes, they're magic." Marilyn chuckled, a low creak over small stones. "They're amber-stitched, that's for sure." She tapped the seam with a knuckle. "Do you know what amber is?" "Old tree sap that caught the sun and kept it. These stitches remind the leather of light. It's like the trees made their own little lanterns, and the shoes borrowed that glow. Bree leaned in. Did they glow for Mom? They did, Marilyn said, eyes bright with a picture. Once, at her class play, your mother's voice shook so hard she could barely speak. She looked at her shoes, and the thread lit like a line drawn for her to follow. She took one step, then the next, and sang like she wasn't afraid of herself. Bree held the image, the thread between then and now. The shoes don't make you brave, Marilyn said softly. They show you where your bravery lives. She cupped Bree's hands between hers. When the glow fades, it's not because the light is gone. It's because it moved. Right here. She pressed Bree's fingers to Bree's own chest. Bree felt the drum of her heart, a sensible, working sound, like a small engine that had always been there. She thought of the square in the wind, of Lena's steady hands, of her mother at some old play, breathing through fear. Thank you, Grandma, Bree whispered, the thanks as much for the story as the shoes. The seams brightened in a pleased little sigh of light. Bree placed the shoes neatly by her bed that night and lay staring at the ceiling's pale shapes. She pictured the amber thread like a path that connected feet across years. Her mother's, maybe Grandma's once, now hers. And someday, who knew? She thought of amber holding insects for 1,000 years, and how it kept small things safe without hardening the world around them. She remembered her mother's words, less hard, and how even a small glow could turn stone steps softer beneath your feet. The shoes didn't want to keep her. They wanted to let her go forward. Bree shut her eyes, and the day replayed with more space around it. The exact minute she could have walked away, and the single word that kept her there. Okay. Morning found the yard crisp and rimmed with dew. Bree slipped on the shoes and stepped into a rustle of leaves. The seams brightened, then bloomed, and with each turn she left a ribbon of honey-colored light that curved and loosened and faded like breath on glass. She laughed, a clean sound. Overhead, a wedge of geese stitched the sky with their calls. In the street, a garbage can lid clinked. Life ticked forward. She stood still and pressed a palm to her chest. The warmth there answered. Whether the shoes shone or not, she had found the place they'd been pointing to. She imagined her mother's trail looping into hers, and beyond that, her grandmother's steps stitched into the same path, all glowing faintly together. The thought filled her with a steadiness larger than herself. Each curl bounced with her steps, catching the morning light like little coils of bronze, as though they too remembered the same sun her mother once stood beneath, and her grandmother before that. A cedar-sweet breeze stirred the yard, carrying a faint dust light from the attic where it had begun. Bree's laughter lifted with the wind, joining the geese above in a bright, unshaken chorus. She danced one more loop through the leaves, not to make a trail, but because movement felt like drawing a door in the air and walking through. And she wondered if someday someone else might follow her glow.